This is the last sermon on the Beatitudes series, at least for this time. We come to the very last one, Beatitude, these words of Jesus. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for they will be called children of God. No, I read that wrong. For theirs is what? The kingdom of heaven. Sorry. I'm really tired. All right, here we go. Let's do that again. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. There we go. Blessed are you when people revile you, persecute you, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Blessed are the persecuted. Boy, that's quite a contrast, isn't it? Persecution, and to link that to being blessed. We've noticed some persecution just this week in the news, haven't we? I mean, the idea of sending bombs through the mail, a synagogue, 6 people dead. Am I right about that? How many now? 11? Oh, it's grown since I first heard the news then. 11 dead? In a synagogue where they're worshiping on their Sabbath day? Something's wrong with this world, isn't it? Blessed are the persecuted. Now, I normally do not think of myself as being persecuted, and you probably don't think of yourselves as being persecuted. I had to rack my memory to think, have I ever been persecuted? I did remember one story. In my second appointment, a member of the congregation, it was called New Hope United Methodist in Proctorville, Ohio. Do you know where Proctorville is? Of course you don't. Proctorville, Ohio is right across from Huntington, West Virginia. And Huntington, West Virginia is where Marshall University's at, in case you didn't know. And a member of my congregation there was named Diane Beatty. A remarkable human being. She's now deceased, but she was the founder of the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition, a grassroots effort to seek to protect the environment. So she spoke against pollution and things like that. And she garnered a lot of attention. She didn't like attention. She's really a rather private person. But someone wrote a scathing article about her in the local newspaper in Huntington. It was obvious they did not know her because they attributed that her environmental work was because of malicious intent to undermine good industries, and that she was a person without integrity. They said that. She had no integrity. And I read this, and I knew Diane very well. Her son was in the youth group that I led. I would meet from her time to time for spiritual counsel because it wasn't easy doing what she did, just to support her, and she'd ask my advice about different things. So I knew her really well. I knew her husband really well. So I decided to write a letter to the editor in response to this scathing article that attacked her character. And I might do that for you. If someone attacked your character, I might defend your character because you're part of Shiloh, and if I know you well, I would do the same for you. So I didn't think it was a big deal. I just wrote this letter to the editor, okay, and said that obviously you don't know Diane. I'm her pastor, and I want to tell you I hold her in high esteem, and she's a person of truthfulness, and you can disagree about issues, that's fine, but to attack her character is not right. So that's all I wrote, and I got many comments of appreciation, especially from other congregants in the church, but not everybody liked it. I got a phone call, and the person called me up, and it was an anonymous phone call. And they said, are you that pastor who is the pastor of Diane Beatty? And I said, well, yes. And he said, you're going to die soon. And hung up the phone. Now, Diane had received numerous death threats. And all of a sudden, I get one for a letter to the editor. All right? And I know it was only meant to make me afraid, which that person did accomplish. I was a little afraid. I looked over my shoulder for a little while, let me tell you. I did. I tried to report it, and it didn't go anywhere. Back that long ago, it wasn't easy to trace phone calls and didn't have caller ID and all that stuff then. So it didn't go anywhere. But I did not feel blessed by that phone call. I did not get off from that phone call and go, wow, I'm going to rejoice now. I have just received a death threat. Yeah, I did something for righteousness. Yeah, I didn't do that. All right, and yet that's what it says here. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. I thought I did something for righteousness' sake. But here's the point, isn't it? The world does not always welcome good news. Doesn't. Because good news for those who are sometimes not very powerful is seen as a threat to the powerful. The world doesn't recognize good news. If it had, wouldn't the world have embraced Jesus fully? And yet he was maligned and rejected and ridiculed and then falsely accused and tortured and crucified. the world does not welcome good news. It doesn't always like the will of God. And Jesus is trying to speak to people there that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Just for being someone who says, I'm a Hebrew. It was not safe to be a Hebrew in that day. And evidently, it's still not safe to be a Hebrew. But Jesus is meaning to say that God wants to bless those who suffer in their work with justice. God desires to bring blessings to those who work for restorative justice, who seek to do what is right in this world. God wants to bless them. And how does God bless those who are suffering for doing what's right? God gives God's presence. God empowers. God helps that person to speak with truth. God gathers other people around that person or group so that they do not walk alone. God desires to bless those who are suffering in their work with justice. There's a myth about these blessings of God. Sometimes people think if you're just faithful to God, you will have God's protection. And so I ask the question, does faithfulness equal God's protection? There's a myth that says that it does. But my experience is no. Certainly didn't work for Jesus, did it? Didn't work for him. Didn't work for the disciples, did it? A number of them were martyred. So does faithfulness equal protection? Doesn't look like it. Now, one time, you remember there were people complaining about children to Jesus. Get these kids out of here, right? And you remember what Jesus said? He said, let the children come to me, for it is to such that belongs what? The kingdom of heaven, right? And it would be better for someone who causes such a child to fall, right? It would be better if that person what? Had a millstone tied around the neck and they would be thrown what? Into the sea. Which if we listen to all that, it sounds like we're to do the protecting. God calls us to protect others. So we, as the church, are to protect children. Would you agree? That's our job. We are to protect children and youth at almost all costs, because they are precious. And they often don't have as much power as others. We're to protect children. We are to do the protecting. That's God's call. Sometimes we perpetuate this myth that if you do what God wants, then you'll have God's protection. So I've even said this before, okay? So I've perpetuated the myth before, but I've said sometimes, if you have your devotions with God, if you pray, and if you're faithful to that, and if you read the scriptures and you spend quiet time with God, then your day will go better. Have you ever said that? Thought it? Wanted it? All right? It's not true. Maybe it is a little bit, but it's not completely true. I have had plenty of days where I read the scriptures, prayed, meditated, listened, journaled, did all that, and had a horrible day. Horrible day. Why? Because this world, it often doesn't welcome good news. It doesn't want it. Sometimes. If it were true that if you just pray, you'll have God's protection, everybody would be a Christian. If it were just that simple, can you imagine how people would be rushing in to be Christians? Hey, just pray and then you'll have an easy day. Sign me up, right? If it's just that simple. It's not. The world doesn't run right and it rejects God. Jesus says as much here. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely. So we're to be in the world, though, but not of it, right? We're to be in it. So we want to engage people. We want to speak for what's right. We want to stand up for what's right. But we aren't to use merely the tactics of the world and become like the world. We're not to be a people of meanness, a people who manipulate others. We're not to tell lies for the sake of a good end. That's not our way. We're to be in the world, but not of it. Now, I went to an ethics training seminar this week about boundaries, okay? It is required for all United Methodist pastors once every 4 years to go through ethics training, specifically sexual ethics training and boundary training, all right? Because years ago, the United Methodist Church was sued because they passed a pastor who had indiscretions in one church on to another church, and they did not inform the other church of the indiscretions that happened over there, and then they happened there, and, well, you get the picture, don't you? And so they were sued, and they found out we didn't have any training, we didn't have anything in place, and so now I got to do this. And I think that's pretty much true, what, in most professions? Don't most professions have to have this kind of stuff? So if you're a school teacher, you're going to have boundary training, and so all these things. Okay, so you got it. Now, at this training, they said a new form of persecution is becoming rampant in our day. You have any idea what it is? Social media. People sit behind a computer screen and say things to someone else that they would never say face to face. It's called, they said, virtual courage. Because people say things because they think they're what? anonymous, or that, they can say this because it's just easier to press a button. I don't know if you've experienced that or not, that people attack one another on social media. Sometimes I am not on Facebook. Did you know that? Can't find me there. You might be able to find my wife, but you can't find me. All right? Can't find me because why? I don't want you to know what I had for breakfast. Okay? I don't really care to do that. I just don't. I don't want to be asked for advice on Facebook. I don't want to. I am spared from a lot of problems just by that, not doing that. But I understand that I'm also giving up an arena of ministry, which could be very valuable and quite useful, and other pastors use this very well, and I go, yay, good for you, but not me, okay? All right, so I'm not there, but this is what they said in the training. This is good. This just happened to coincide with this sermon about persecution. So you ready for this? Here we go. Let's put it up there. It says, think before you post. All right? Think before you post. You probably heard this in some of your all's training elsewhere and all, but look at this. Think before you post. First of all, is it true? Now, is everything that's posted on the internet true? No. Do everything we read in the newspaper, is it true? No. This is life, isn't it? I was on the net the other day doing some research, and it said somewhere that some actor had died. And I thought, I didn't know that person had died. I checked it out. They had not died. They had not died. Craziness. Okay, so is it true? You better check it out. Is it true? Just because it says it's true doesn't mean it's true. Is it helpful to post it? See the acronym? TH. All right, what's the I? Is it inspiring? All right, is it going to lift somebody up? Is it necessary? Well, that eliminates most of it. Just gone there. Is it necessary? No, not necessary. All right. And the last one I love. Is it kind? Doesn't the world need more kindness? And ought they not to find it in the church, right? Now, there was another acronym. I didn't put it up there. And it's called HALT. Have you ever heard that? HALT, H-A-L-T. So before you post, halt. And you're never supposed to post if you're what? Hungry? All right? Hungry, H-A, angry. Put those two together, you got hangry, right? L, do you know what that stands for? Who said that? You know it. Have you received this training just like I did? Okay. Lonely. Don't post if you're lonely. And the last one is T. Tired. Well, then I could never post. Right? All right. So there. Let's watch this persecution stuff. Because if we're not careful, we can get sucked into it. Because it's the way of the world. But there is a promise here. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of heaven is where God's will is completely done, fully accomplished. And so when Jesus says this to those who are persecuted, he's saying to them, don't give up. When it looks like righteousness is not winning, that evil is winning, don't give up. When it looks like you're not being rewarded for doing what is right, don't give up, because God sees this, and there is a kingdom of heaven, and one day God's will be fully done. It will.